Welcome everyone to the Alive with Courage podcast. Super excited to have Chris Hantla with us. Chris is a special man. He's a coach, he's a speaker, he's a trainer with Identity Exchange. And he helps people discover their true identity and learn how to live fearlessly in the love of God. And Chris, this work has just revolutionized my life over the last 2 or 3 years. So I'm super excited for this convo, man.
Yeah, me too. Well, it's done the same for me, so I'm excited about it as well.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Tell us about a little bit about your origin story, where you came from, and your journey a bit. And even, I mean, you ended up in Iraq really early on in your life. So I'd love to hear how that even started.
Yeah, my first job out of college. I grew up in Oklahoma.
Mm.
Even went to college in Oklahoma. I grew up in the same house. Went to the same church, even through college, and so I grew up in it was a Southern Baptist church, and I'm super grateful for that origin and what that poured into me.
Mm.
Um, it, I it was I don't mean this negatively, but I kind of look back on it and I realized like, yeah, there were some religious elements to that where again, it was like religion to me are signposts that point towards something else. And
Mm.
I didn't realize that a lot of what I was growing up with was just like resting into the signposts and just sitting at those and missing the fact that they were pointing towards something different. And I from a young age, I made this 6-year-old decision to come forward and follow Jesus, and um, it it was a decision really because I was afraid of dying and afraid of going to hell because I did hear that message a lot growing up, and so I made this decision when I was young, and then for years, actually, I didn't know that there was anything else. It was sort of like someone handed me a ticket to an amusement park, and I walked through the front gates, and I was like, "Okay, I'm in. That's awesome. Here I am." And years later, 16, 17 years old, somebody began talking to me about just a personal relationship with God. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that was a part of the deal. That's kind of cool. Like, yeah, here's a roller coaster. Why don't you ride it? And I didn't actually know how to do it. And then I began listening to sermons more intentionally. Like, okay, would somebody tell me how to do this
Yeah.
idea of a relationship with God? And I can remember sermon after sermon, and it just felt like a bunch of shoulds. Uh, you should be having a quiet time. You should be reading your Bible. You should be loving people. You should be this. And I would come to the end of these teachings and sermons, and I was like, "How? But just tell me. Like, I want that. I see the vision of it, but just show me how, or somebody tell me how." And on occasion, I would get these hows. Like I did have one mentor in our youth group, and she actually started talking to the students about um, yeah, reading your Bible, and here's how to read your Bible. And
Mm.
so that was super helpful. There was a how that was helpful. Um, and I laugh because I think back. We had this Wednesday night prayer service, and the Wednesday night prayer service was show up, eat a meal together, which I actually really always enjoyed Wednesday night. But it was enjoy a meal together. And then people had sent in prayer requests, and the pastor would basically read the prayer requests. Most of them were sort of unspoken requests. You've heard those. And then it would just sort of be this 5 to 7 minutes of just prayer. Like, and then that was it. And then he would give a 45-minute sermon or another teaching in the Bible because it just wouldn't be, complete without that.
Yeah.
And again, it was like I'm reading in the scriptures, Jesus would go away by himself and he would pray. And I would think to myself, what was he doing when he was going away by himself? And
Answering prayer cards.
yeah, exactly. Did the disciples write, their unspoken requests, and he was just holding them? And I didn't know what that even looked like. And I picked up a book on prayer. At one point, somebody handed me a book on prayer, and it was all the scriptures in the Bible about prayer. And again, it wasn't a how-to. It was just like, you should be doing this, and here's what the scriptures say about it. So I did a Bible study on prayer, but still didn't know how to pray.
Yeah.
And I tried different ways. It was like I would write out my own lists of prayers, and I could not sustain it. It was dry, it was boring, and, I would journal, but I didn't even realize then it was like I was having a conversation with myself, and I would open the Bible and I I wasn't even really listening for God's voice, it was just sort of study the Bible, really learn it well, and, so I was doing my best, right? And all of this, trying to manage sin and behaviors and all of this. And it just all felt very disconnected from God.
Mm,
Um, and then somehow in the midst of that, I did get this sense like he was leading me to Bible college. And I would have said, God spoke to me, and I think this is where I'm supposed to be going. But
mm,
and my college roommate did. He actually came to me one day and said, I think he was reading a Brennan Manning book, and Brennan Manning in the book was talking as if God was speaking to him. And so
mm,
my roommate came to me and he said, "Do you think God can speak to us?" This is my best friend. We were in Bible classes together. "Do you think God can speak to us like he did to people in the Bible?" And with just full conviction and ignorance, I just confidently said to him, "No, absolutely not. He gave us the Bible. We're supposed to study the Bible. We're making A's in our classes. This is it. When we finish up this, Bible degree, we'll be ready to go." And it wasn't a few months later, probably maybe a year later, we finished up that Bible degree. And I remember thinking to myself,
mm.
boy, I feel really spiritually dry. And actually, I have no idea what I'm supposed to be doing with my life. And um, around that same time, though, and that felt like a huge disconnect. Let me say that. Like,
Yeah.
I've done everything that I'm supposed to do according to my tradition. I've been baptized. I read the scriptures daily. I've really studied them. I know them well.
Mm,
And yet, I'm like, I look at these people in the Bible and their intimate relationship with God. And I don't have that. And I remember reading this verse, um, John 10, and I actually think I said this in the threshold. We were just talking about that earlier. And I remember reading Jesus saying, "I have come that you might have life and have it to its fullest."
mm,
And I didn't know what that meant. And it was I, I want that. Again, almost like a should from Jesus. But it was like, somebody's got to show me how to do this. I don't know how to do it. I've done my best up to this point. And then around that same season, so this would have been, 9/11 happened in 2001, and then um, the United States invaded Iraq to get rid of Saddam Hussein. And I remember watching with the rest of the nation at that point, shock and awe, that first initial invasion. It was actually air invasion.
mm,
And turning to my roommate, same guy, same friend, Kevin. And I remember turning to Kevin, watching that and going, Baghdad's open. Like, we got to go there after college. That's where we need to go.
wow.
Maybe that's the adventure, right? Maybe that's the abundant life that Jesus was talking about. And I just sort of held it. It felt significant. It felt like more than just me wanting that, because who wants to go to Baghdad? I mean, that, like, it felt deeper than that, than just simply, we should go do this thing. And I had grown up in a church that believed in international mission work and that sort of thing. And my mom was actually the head of the women's mission union, and she would pray for missionaries and she would send care packages. And so I grew up in that sort of
Mm,
subculture, in that world, and it was significant. um and I'd been on a lot of short-term mission trips, which were a ton of fun. We would go do soccer camps with kids, me and all my friends, brother as well. We all played soccer, and so we would go to different places in the US and run these soccer camps, and they were impactful for me. I watched God impact kids, and I was always impacted by just seeing different people and different lives. I grew up in the suburbs of Oklahoma City, and going into the inner city of some of these places and meeting these kids, it just was like they're living a totally different life. And I just remember it
mm,
making a significant impact on me. But I never in a million years thought I would ever, like, go overseas or do something like that. And another funny part of this, though, is when when I sensed God leading me to go to Bible college, I distinctly remember telling him, "I do not wanna be a pastor in a church. I do not even wanna work in a church." But then I had done some intern work with my youth pastor and even our head pastor, and I saw, like, behind the curtain a little bit, and I
Yeah.
was like, I don't know. I don't please don't call me to do that." But then I was like, "Why are you asking me to be a Bible major? Like, what is that all about?" And again, these are the days where God doesn't speak to me, but I still found myself having these
Yeah.
conversations with him.
Yeah.
So,
And also, I mean, I just want to point out too
yeah,
that like wrestling longing for adventure, like in your heart, like you're like, there's got to be some frontier or some adventure in this thing that,
yeah,
yeah,
yes,
so
yeah.
that just, yeah, that's incredible.
Well, yeah, uh, my dad was a small business owner. His dad was a pastor, so he grew up actually very poor, and when he was young, um, I don't know if he said this out loud as a vow, but he certainly told us growing up, "I don't want my kids to grow up under that same sort of poverty that I grew up in." And so there was this immediate negative connotation with being in ministry somehow, poverty, and how there was a bit of shame attached to that.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that had anything to do with me not wanting to be a pastor, but I also watched my dad work really hard for our family and provide well for us. But I craved his attention and just wanted him around,
Yeah.
and he just worked long hours, and I did start to see the sort of breakdown of, or the discontent even within my own self,
Mm.
and my relationship with my dad, and I had a good dad, by the way, like, he's still living, and I just honor him and everything that he poured into my life,
Mm.
but I wish I had more time with him, and that caused me as a 17-year-old, I read the book of Ecclesiastes, and I remember as I read that book, um, again, coming away from it and realizing, like, it's all vanity. This American dream and securing yourself and trying to make a lot of money, like, I don't want that.
Mm.
I don't want that, and then reading Jesus, my invitation to you is abundant life. It's like he's got an adventure for us. That's got to be what it is. It's not the American dream and just the
Mm.
2 cars and a dog and a picket fence. It's like there's got to be more adventure to life than that.
Yeah.
And so again, all these factors coming together in my heart and in my mind in college, and this is one of the ways I've realized that God does speak to us. Like we pay attention to those longings, those desires, those signposts again in our own lives and how he's writing our story. As we pay attention to those things, they guide us. And so long story short, turning to my roommate, we should go there um, to Baghdad, and we can, in my mind, I'm thinking we can go save them, right? They've been under this dictator, and our country's just liberated their country. They're going to be so happy to see us, and that's how I ended up in Baghdad. It was all these factors coming together, and
Oh.
I signed up thinking I actually wouldn't get uh, um, accepted to a mission organization to move overseas and do actually
Mm.
working with an NGO in Baghdad. Um, and I arrive in Baghdad, and in my mind is this gospel I've grown up with, kind of this ticket, right? I hadn't really moved much beyond just helping people get into the gate of the amusement park, and so that was what I was bringing with me, and I remember arriving in Baghdad from Oklahoma. So I grew up in Oklahoma. My first move out of Oklahoma is to the Middle East,
Wow.
into
That's
this
incredible.
war zone. Yeah, it was like, what am I doing? And it was amazing, and I was super
Mm.
excited. It was very romantic, even to me. Just it
Yeah.
felt very romantic. So I arrive in Baghdad. I remember getting off the plane after 48 hours of travel and just being exhausted. And I got picked up by um, this gal, Madeline, and another guy who I ended up rooming with. He was another single guy, older than I was, named Rob. And we get in the car, we have a driver, and we're driving from the airport, and we're driving through the streets of Baghdad. And, this is the place you'd seen on television. We'd all seen this place on television. And I'm watching or seeing out the windows Black Hawks flying over and Apache helicopters. And again, super exciting, very romantic. And then I start seeing the destruction, thing after thing.
Mm,
And immediately I started to feel small in it all. I just thought, oh my gosh, how am I going to make an impact in this place for the
mm,
kingdom, for God? And even this question formed in me, um, is your gospel big enough for this place,
mm.
for this conflict zone, for this war? Um, and it scared me actually. And I probably will come back in my story, but I just began to feel inadequate, like almost immediately upon arrival. Just I'm
Yeah.
not enough for this, and
It sounds like even like God might not be enough for this. Like, is his gospel even big enough for this?
yeah, oh, 100%. And at this point in my thinking, actually, though I was I called myself a Christian, and I'd grown up in the church, and I mean, this is weird to say, but I knew Jesus in a I knew about him. I knew his stories, and I could tell his stories.
Yeah.
I didn't realize though, I didn't really know him though.
Mm,
And and I didn't really actually know the Father. Not really. Like I had a few moments, powerful moments where I'd experienced God in some really specific and personal, intimate ways that it was a knowledge not here that I had spent years and years building this knowledge. But the experience of my heart, man, I only had 3 or 4 of those moments up to that point.
mm,
And my thinking even in all of that was, it's all up to me. I have to do this for God. And for
mm.
sure, in that way of thinking, I'm not enough. He's not enough because he's looking down at me waiting for me to do something. And it was like, I'm gonna go do the work of God without the power of God. I'm gonna
Yeah.
go do the work of the Holy Spirit without actually knowing or
Mm,
experiencing or having the Holy Spirit.
mm,
And it was just overwhelming to me almost immediately. And um, so fast forward over the next couple of months, I just carried the burden of that, the weight of that, and I went back to the scriptures because again, that's all I knew. It was like, do I have the right gospel? Am I really understanding the gospel?
wow.
And I would go back to the scriptures and read, and all I could see was through my particular lenses, which I
Mm,
think is another significant part of this. We come to the Bible to read the Bible, not realizing we're reading it through a particular worldview.
mm,
And I was reading it through a separation worldview. And that simply means like I didn't know that God was with me. I didn't have a conscious awareness of that. Even though again, I could read it in the scriptures, it wasn't experiential to me and I didn't know how to access that.
mm.
And so for all intents and purposes, I'm looking at the world disconnected from God
Yeah.
and didn't know it at the time, but even disconnected from my own heart, my own emotions, my own self. I was disconnected from others and I didn't realize all that. And living then in that, it's all up to me. I have to figure this out. Everything felt like there wasn't enough. I wasn't enough. There wasn't enough resources in the world. There wasn't enough time to do all of this. And again, I'm looking at a city. I don't remember the exact population of Baghdad, 12 million at least, though. I mean, it was a huge city. And I'm like, I'm just one guy. I am not enough for this. There's not enough time for me to talk to all these people. There's just not enough in the world. And that's what happens when we're operating in a false worldview,
Yeah.
a faulty worldview.
And it's really interesting because there's almost like all this evidence that would say that's correct. You're one guy with 12 million, like
Right.
there's the evidence. It's pretty disheartening just the amount of like in that worldview of separation, how much the world wants to validate that worldview. It's
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah. There are plenty of facts that seem to indicate that this is a true way of seeing the world. There's not enough time. There's not enough resources. There's not enough this, that, and the other. And we tell ourselves a story based on those facts. And that's the problem right there. We're telling ourselves that story. Or for most of us, and we all know this voice, we're letting the enemy tell us that story. Hey, look at all these facts. This is what is. Now let me tell you the story to connect all those facts. And never once did I realize or stop to think what needs to change within me is actually that worldview lens. And I don't even know how to do that. So it was so out of my awareness that this was how I was operating in the world, disconnected from God, in a false identity, that no matter what situation I showed up into, whether that was, later in my marriage, if I'm showing up in a faulty worldview, looking at the world through false lenses, and I'm showing up in a false identity, I don't know who I am, what kind of fruit am I going to bear? There's
Mm,
only one kind of fruit that I can bear. And Jesus actually said that. He said, "They will know you by your fruit." And a good tree will only produce good fruit,
mm,
and a bad tree cannot help but produce bad fruit. There's no other way around it. And how I understand that now, what Jesus was saying is just what I was saying. If we show up with a wrong worldview and a wrong identity, we're only going to bear one kind of fruit, and it's not going to be good fruit.
mm.
Disconnected from God, apart from God. And Jesus says it so plainly and clearly, but I just didn't have the know-how of what it meant to actually walk this out. If you are disconnected from the vine, apart from the vine, you you will not bear good fruit. You cannot bear good. It's not a condemnation. It's just like a fact of reality in the kingdom.
It is so interesting that lens, that separated versus connected lens, like, because you can read the scriptures in one way and it just means something totally different
Oh
depending
yeah.
on what lens you have. It's incredible. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And what I began to realize over time, and I'll get to how I actually started to discover the how. It was because I met this couple, and they had some real practical how tos to actually do this. But I realized every time I was coming to the scriptures, I could only see what my faulty worldview was allowing me to see. And transformation itself, this is actually what Jesus, I think, is offering the world. When he talks about salvation, he's talking way, way more than just where we go when we die or what happens to us after we die. That's an element of it. But Jesus continually, and even in that verse, I came now to give you now an abundant life and life to its fullest. And I'm like, I can exegete this passage. I know he's not talking about in the future. He is literally talking about right now. And so there was it created a hunger and thirst in me. And I began to realize what he's offering us in terms of salvation is complete and utter transformation. Transformation from the inside out, the
Mm,
exchange of those glasses that we're looking at the world through, an exchange of a false identity for a true one, liberation at the heart level, all the way out to the external. Like it will manifest itself in the world when we begin to understand what Jesus is actually bringing to us and what the Holy Spirit and Jesus in the Holy Spirit and through the Holy Spirit it is capable of doing in the world.
mm,
And it starts with internal transformation at this level of identity and worldview.
mm.
Um, so that was a revelation that didn't come till later. But here I am looking still at the world at this stage of the game in my life through this separated worldview, and I did not know who I was. I didn't. And what I mean by that simply is, um, the my country that I grew up in, the United States, told me your identity is an American. That's who you are. The
Mm,
family I grew up in, you are a part of us. That's who you are. My religious upbringing, they're telling me this is your identity. These are all like teams that we belong to.
mm,
And and as best as I could, I was operating within that team framework, like letting them tell me who I was. And oh, as a Christian, this is what it means to be a good Christian. So, okay, I'm going to abide by the rules of Christianity and the rules of my team, and what they think is honorable, I'm going to try to do the honorable things. What is dishonorable, I'm not going to do those things. And I got good at that stuff, but it was really a conformity to this external system, though, not
Mm,
realizing that even that was it was not real. It was not a true identity. It was like what the Pharisees had become accustomed to doing.
mm,
What was honorable to them, then they were going to do that. What was right, the law was right, so we're going to abide by the law, and we're going to do everything the law requires of us. And they did it well, actually. Even Paul said, "I did it perfectly," which we are like, well, only Jesus is perfect. But Paul was like, no, there's a righteousness that exists apart from any sort of external system that we might be a part of, and it has nothing to do with morality or doing right and wrong. Which
mm.
was also super confusing because I'm like, "Well, what other kind of righteousness could there be?" Like, didn't Jesus perfectly live by the law, and that's why he was righteous? And doesn't isn't it like a transactional sort of judicial thing? Isn't that what this means?
Mm,
Again, the gospel that I had versus, like, what I came to discover about Jesus. And
mm.
so, all these things just had to completely be transformed in me, and driving through Baghdad, looking at this destruction, it just began to push on, and I didn't and it wasn't it was like, this is how the Spirit works. He began pushing on and asking me to ask questions, to question the way I was looking at the world.
Isn't that insane how God like will take you to the brink of unbelief almost to get you
Oh,
to
it's
open
terrible.
up and start asking new questions about does this faith I've studied for the last 20 odd years actually work out in the world? And what better place than Baghdad to say, does it work, you know? And
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
it's insane just how he takes you out over your skis, out into adventure, and is like, "Hey, do the skis hold? Like, does it work?"
yeah.
And it's like the truth is, no, it doesn't. And so, cool. What do we want to do about that, right?
Right, right, right. Oh my gosh, like, so many thoughts are firing off in my head even as you say that, 'cause, again, I showed up thinking in Baghdad that I was going to be bringing something, like, something of value and worth
Yeah.
to these people, and I look back and I realize, like, God was looking at me and he was going, "No, it's you. I want you. I want to transform you, and you don't even begin to know what you don't even know." And I mean, just one of those things was, so 9/11 happened and we all experienced 9/11. It was scary for us. And we all were introduced to Islam and Muslims through that experience. And we could only see this religion and these people who adhere to this religion and ideology through the lens of the terror that we experience and the fear of that moment. And so a Muslim to me was Osama bin Laden. I
Yeah.
knew no other Muslims. I mean, the funny thing is I go back to my yearbook and it again, how we in a worldview don't see, we cannot see what we don't even realize we can't see. And I went back to my yearbook years later in high school and I saw covered girls in my yearbook. And I'm like, how did I not even realize there were Muslims in my high school? Like, what is wrong with me? How could I not even see that?
Uh,
And so it really felt like my introduction to Muslims was 9/11, which is a horrible introduction to a people group. And if that's the only way I can see these people is through the terror that's being, again, I think it's intentional, put on our screens all the time to make us fearful
mm,
and and justify, again, I don't want to get political, but to justify some of these things that we're doing in the world against these are our enemies. We have to go after them.
mm,
And so I went with that mindset, but I was going to do it in a Christian way because Jesus is like, yeah, we don't use the sword, but here's the gospel. Use this as a sword. So it was still this conquering mindset that I'm carrying, and I'm gonna defeat these people in a more Christian loving way. And and even that was like, am I? Like, am I enough to do that? Like, there's a lot of there's 2 billion Muslims in the world. Again, there's not enough time. There's not enough anything to do that. So even that was just it was just a question in my head. Um, again, going back to looking back on it, one of the first things that God said to me was, and it was funny how it happened. I'm fast forwarding a little bit. We'd actually moved from Baghdad to Jordan. Our team moved from Baghdad to Jordan because of some particular situations that outside of our control. It was just too violent, too dangerous, and we couldn't remain in Baghdad. So we traveled to Amman, Jordan, really for what we thought was going to be some R&R, and then we would go back to Baghdad at a later date when things kind of calmed down. We ended up never moving back, but in Jordan, um, I received some really good training. Here's how to here's really how to conquer Muslims. And again, I say that so tongue in cheek. Here's some really good Christian tools for learning how to share your faith. And and I was excited about these because I didn't actually know. I didn't have any good tools at that point. And I was going out every day just with real boldness and excitement. And I would go find shop owners and things, and I would sit down and I would explain the Trinity using these new tools, but really no transformation had yet really started to happen in my own heart. And so I'm still operating in this separation worldview. It's all up to me, but now I've got some really good tools, and it's going to be the tools that changes minds and hearts, right? So I'm running all over the city, and I'm sharing the kingdom circles, and I'm doing um we had this way of talking about the Trinity that a Muslim could actually understand. And I received these really good external tools. Again, I'm still trying to do the work of the Holy Spirit without any power whatsoever of the Holy Spirit. And I kept getting invited over to people's houses, like they were actually responsive in some ways to what I was sharing. And I was like, it's working, it's actually working. And I had just started to be friends with this girl on our team who is now actually my wife. And so we went out for coffee after I'd come back from sharing with these three guys at a shop, and I'd walked them through a couple of these tools, and they wanted to know more. And so, hey, this is awesome. And they wanted to invite me over. And so I came just feeling really high and excited about what had just happened. And my wife's name is Jamie. And so that's gonna be confusing later, but but I'm sitting with, um, this girl on our team, Jamie, and, she'd grown up in the Middle East, and actually she didn't have the same sort of hangups that I had. She knew Muslims and had known Muslims for a lot of years before 9/11 had ever happened, so that was not her introduction to Muslims or the Islamic world. And so here I am bragging about all these great things that I was doing and doing for God and conquering these people in this mindset that I had. And she just like got annoyed with me, and she stopped me, and she's got this prophetic edge to her that I just so appreciate. It hurts, it hurts my pride and my ego even to this day, but she's always right in it. It's funny. And she stopped me that day and she goes, "Chris, do you even love these people? Do you love any of those guys that you were just with?" And I mean, it was such a punch to the gut. It was such an ego punch. And but it stopped me in my tracks. And I just sat there like I didn't have anything to say to it because I knew the answer. It was like, no, there's zero love. There's just only fear. And my whole motivation is not actually love. I would have said outwardly, like, yeah, I love them in that I'm trying to convert them and get them this ticket into heaven. But I mean, from a heart, no, I did absolutely not love them. And, a- and so going back, what we were saying, like I went to the Middle East with a motivation and a perspective, and God obviously has a different perspective, and he's always after this. He's always after us. Like I would have told a lost person, you're like a lost coin in a house, and God loves you and he wants to sweep the house clean and try to find you. And God's going, Chris, you're the lost coin. Like you are the lost coin. I love you. And you don't actually know it. And you're a missionary overseas. And and again, we've lived a lot of years overseas and we've worked with a lot of missionaries. And I know that culture well, that subculture well. And
Mm.
it's dominant. It is and I work with even a lot of pastors and ministers in churches now in the current job that I'm doing. And it surprises people when they actually start hearing from God and getting into that posture of listening and contemplative prayer and interacting with God. The first thing, and I've seen this over and over, and people are so surprised by this. Like, wait a minute, you just want to spend time with me? Like, you like me? You delight in me? You're not angry with me? You're not disappointed with me? I don't have to go work for your favor, even in a Christian way. Like, I don't have to earn this. And it's like, no, no, you this is what I want the whole world to know. Their
Mm.
sonship, their daughtership, that I love you. You're the one that's lost. You're the one that I would leave the 99 for and come find you. I didn't get it. I just simply didn't get it. I could share those stories about Jesus, but I really truly didn't know him.
Mm. Dang, man. That's insane. It's yeah, like I said earlier, just that like that moment where that gets confronted. And I'm really curious. So you got confronted in that way, like I don't actually love these people, and then it sounds like you. I guess where did it go from there? Like what happened? How did because if fear was the dominant thing that you just got faced with, that's like I'm.
Yeah.
This whole thing is based in fear. How did you experience love for the first time in that way?
Yeah. Yeah, great question. And what I was saying, my wife's name is Jamie. Why that's confusing is because there was this couple on our team in Baghdad that I also met for the first time there, and I briefly mentioned them earlier.
Were they part of the NGO, or it was more
Yeah,
like they were
yeah,
friends? Okay, got
yeah,
it.
yeah. So we all worked for the same NGO, and this guy and his wife had started a project in Baghdad, teaching English to business people who were suddenly confronted with like the international markets, and they wanted to go make money in the international markets, but English is the trade language of the world, and prior to that, English was not a real well-known language in the country, and so they started this school, and I mean they had the top leaders from every industry in
Wow,
Baghdad coming to them
interesting.
because it was just a great strategic move. And so I go and meet the director of this school for the first time, and he's just a wild man. Like he's talking different than I have ever heard anybody talk, and so is his wife, and they're leading prayer meetings at their house and just and I'm like, what's happening? That whole question that I grew up with, how do I do this stuff? How does transformation actually happen? How do we move into abundant life? And I just didn't get a ton of those answers. It was what they had come to discover about the how that was
Mhm.
so attractive to me. And they began teaching our team how to do this, how to do the how of having a relationship with God.
Hmm.
So um um well, for example, uh I remember we moved to Jordan, and there was this guy named Omar, and one of our team members, I think he met him at the British Council or something in Amman, Jordan. And Omar was really struggling with deep, deep depression.
Hmm.
And he called it demonization, actually.
Wow,
That was
interesting.
his word for it. He's like, I am demonized. And our teammate just began sharing a story about how Jesus cast out demons from people. Um and Omar like kind of leaned in, and he's like, does God still do that sort of thing?
Mm.
Can God actually save me? Can he rescue me? And our teammate, who is very much like me, learning all these things and under the tutelage of this guy we just met, invited Omar to come meet with this guy. And so Omar comes over, and because I'm being now discipled by this couple, the guy came to me and he said, I think you should be here for this. Like, you need to watch this.
Mm.
You're going to learn something. And so we sit down together. And again, the guy said, don't say anything. I'll lead this time with Omar. And then our other teammate was there, and we were just both going to be silent witnesses to this. And so Omar launches in and he starts telling his story. He was actually married to this woman in Russia. He had gone to school in Russia to get a master's and PhD, and he'd married a woman who ended up being a witch and was very much into the occult, and they had been divorced. And when they divorced, she apparently I don't know, cast spells, or I have no idea. Anyway, it was something demonic. And again, at this point in my life, I'd grown up Southern Baptist, and this was like, okay, I've read about this. I've read about this. Experienced it? No. I've read about it though.
Wow. Now you're like, I'm in the room. It's
Yeah, and I'm sitting in the room going, what, you know, and again, I have no real power or knowledge to know even what to do with it.
wow.
And so I'm nervous. Like, I'm listening to this story going, what is about to happen? And Omar turns to this guy and he says to him, um can you help me? And can you tell me about Jesus? Like, this other guy told me a story about Jesus. And um this guy who was mentoring me turned back to Omar and said, well, I could tell you about Jesus, or you could just meet him.
Mm.
And I'm sitting there like, armed with a Bible degree, and I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. Like,
Like, I'll tell them about
we- you just missed a huge opportunity to open the Bible. What are you doing? And long story short, the guy just leads Omar in what we now call listening prayer. He just said, I want you to close your eyes,
Mm.
and God's going to speak to you about this. You're going to meet I'm going to ask Jesus to come to you, and he's going to come to you, and he will speak to you. And I'm sitting there going, what is this is so, like, I don't know what's happening right now. And I'm just sort of skeptically watching this and even fearfully watching it. And I watch, here's, the gist of what happened. These dark things started manifesting in his mind and his imagination. He began sweating and crying and shaking, actually physically shaking. And this guy, again, I'm not using his name intentionally. He said to Omar, listen, just in Jesus' name, quiet those voices. Like, invite Jesus into this moment right now. You're seeing this scene in your heart space, in your imagination. It's like being played out on your imagination right now, but it's everything. Like, your imagination is showing you what's actually in your heart right now. And you're seeing this darkness. You're seeing this terror. Jesus
Mm.
is there too. Just invite him into that space and watch and see what Jesus will do. And so he sees Jesus come into this space
Mm.
where only prior to that, darkness and demons and fear and terror were present. And Jesus walks into this space and just rebukes all this darkness.
Mm.
And then he sees this beautiful picture of Jesus picking him up out of the mud
Mm.
and wiping him off and like cleaning him and holding him and actually just speaking these really soothing words. And
Mm.
Omar's entire demeanor completely changed. Like, he went from shaking, crying, freaking out to calm. And the tears were now flowing, but in a totally different way. It was like,
Mm.
I'm watching this physical manifestation thing happen because of something that was happening in the spirit world or in the spirit realm, and I didn't understand it.
Mm.
but I could see the fruit of it. And I was watching this happen, and Omar he's calmly breathing, like his whole nervous system calmed down.
Mm.
And I'm like, this is amazing. Like, this is so weird. And then Omar opens up his eyes and he shares what I just said. But then he said this: Jesus was holding me and wiping me off. I saw this picture, like,
Wow.
and I actually felt it. Like it was as if it were real and happening. I could feel it on my physical body. And
Mm.
as he's wiping me off, he goes, I don't know if this is going to make any sense to you guys, but it was like he was showing me that I've been born again. And I went, no.
Somebody fed him that line. Yeah.
And this wise guy that I'm watching do all of this said, oh, that's really amazing, Omar. You know, Jesus said this. He had a conversation with a guy named Nicodemus. Let's read this story. And we open up the Bible and we read John 3 together. And I was like, wow, that's a really interesting way to introduce a Muslim to the Bible.
Mm.
No argument, no fight over, is the Bible corrupted or isn't it? That's all what I had learned how to do, was have these apologetic arguments about the scriptures. And here I mean, literally 10 minutes, this guy is now not just open to the Bible, but reading this story of Nicodemus, seeing and hearing Jesus say to this other guy what he had just said to him. And
Mm.
not only does he come to faith that night, I mean, just I gotta have it. It's not even like he made it. It's like, I've never experienced anything like this. Of course I want this.
Wow.
Of course I want this. Which really surprised me, because all the people that I see in the scriptures Jesus interact with, that's their response.
Mm.
The demonized guy in the Decapolis that Jesus frees, and all the demons go into the pigs and run off the cliff. That guy's like, can I follow you? Jesus doesn't say, okay, here's what you got to do. The guy's just like, well, I don't know what just happened, but I want what you just did. And
Mm.
he doesn't have to be told, go. Actually, he does, because he wants to come with Jesus. And Jesus is like, no, I want you to remain. And there's a reason I want you to remain.
Mm.
And here's what, just go tell him all the good things that God has done for you. But he already wanted to do that. I mean, that's the beauty. It's just like everybody's response to Jesus in the scriptures. I'm watching that happen in real life. And I'm like,
Wow.
I know nothing about this, Jesus. Like, not like that. Like, Omar's now met Jesus in a way that I'm actually jealous of. And I'm the Christian here. What's happening? Like, this is
Wow.
breaking my brain, and it's breaking my worldview. And so this couple, um, his name is Jamie Winship, and his wife Donna Winship, and the company I now work for, Identity Exchange.
Mm.
But immediately I'm like, I want everything they have to offer. The house, like, how did he even have the confidence to do that?
Yeah.
Like, where did that come from? Where did that sort of boldness to just be able to say,
Mm.
I know beyond the shadow of a doubt, if I ask Jesus to come speak to you, he will. There's an intimacy that has to be present to build that sort of confidence. And so, like, he's had to experience that before. That's not just a blind faith. That's like, no, how do you even do, like, is it possible for me to have that kind of confidence? Is it
Mm.
possible for me to be able to step out in that kind of faith? And I became really, really hungry at that point.
Yeah.
I,
Oh.
I want that. And so I put myself under Jamie and Donna in those days, just because I had never seen that sort of insanity. I mean, really, it felt insane to me.
Mm.
And it wasn't long after that. Really, this is the crux of it, Seth. Like, where it all began to change for me. Um,
Mm.
I realized how much fear was dominating all of my life,
Yeah.
and how every decision and motivation of my heart was actually in response to this fear, in a weird way, even going to Baghdad.
Mm.
Which seems like, how could you be afraid and that fear led you to Baghdad? Well, um, I sit down with Donna, because in those days, again, we were thinking about going back to Baghdad, and all these things had happened, and I was quite afraid to even entertain the thought of going back to Baghdad.
Yeah.
Some teammates had been killed just before I got there, and so I knew that that was a real possibility. But that actually wasn't what I was afraid of. I wasn't necessarily afraid of dying. That actually, oddly enough, I dealt with the Lord years prior.
Hmm.
That was an issue where fear of dying just wasn't my thing. That wasn't my fear. Um, Fear of disappointing people, though,
Hmm.
fear of not being held in high esteem by people, that
Hmm.
was terrifying to me. And when I think back to the days of and what was actually happening in my heart in the days leading up to actually moving overseas, I was getting a lot of attaboys and pats on the back and you're so brave. And for the first time in my life, I was experiencing not just the desire to be held in high esteem by people, but I was experiencing it. You're being held in high esteem, and that feels really good. And again, didn't know anything about ego or pride, but it was in large part why I felt like a real freedom to move overseas. And it was like, oh, this is great, actually. I'm being put up on a pedestal exactly where I always wanted to be. And and now here I was, I arrive in Baghdad and really the fear underneath, like I'm not enough for this was this in the background, this noise in the background, like, yeah, you're gonna be a total failure and you're gonna go home with your tail between your legs and
Wow.
it's gonna be embarrassing. You're not gonna be honored by your community anymore. You're gonna be embarrassed by them. And that became this overwhelming, paralyzing fear for me.
Wow.
And so I go on this walk. Our team just sort of went on a walk. Again, we're in Amman, Jordan. That's our context, and we go on this walk around the neighborhood, and I'm just sort of describing to Donna.
Wait, before you get to that moment, I'm
Yes.
I'm super curious. What was that fear? What was the fruit of that fear? Like as you were living into that fear, what like how was the fruit coming out of your life? Like what did it look
Yeah.
like? What
Yeah.
decisions were you making? What were you avoiding? I'm just curious.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. A bad tree can only bear bad fruit. A bad motivation, a broken motivation, bad worldview, all of that lies, the deception, all of that can only bear one kind of fruit. And so this is a great question because that people pleasing in me, and I can remember, I know now, like sort of where that started to happen for me and break for me a little bit.
Mhm.
And interestingly enough, it goes to the story I was just getting ready to tell you, where Donna sits down with me and we begin she says, I'm gonna ask God questions like you saw happen with Omar in some ways. And God is gonna then speak to you. And I thought that is so weird. Like I don't
Mm.
even know if I believe that. And like he might speak to you because I can see, but to me, I don't know.
Mm.
And but all of the fruit of that my whole life was people pleasing and it's really rooted in a fear of rejection or being cast aside or being separated from.
Yeah.
And so what do I have to do for that not to happen in my life? And I grew up playing soccer. I loved soccer. Um and when I was playing just for myself and carefree and just for the joy of the game, it was amazing. The second I joined a club team, now
Mm.
suddenly there's competition and I have to earn my place on the team. I have to play well enough to keep my place on the team. If I mess up, there's immediate like ridicule from my teammates. And what if I'm not good enough? Again, there's that message. It just sort of comes back around. What if I'm not good enough? And my I think it was my sophomore year of high school. Everybody kind of played on the freshman team because we had a big high school and it was really rare if a freshman got to play varsity. But my sophomore year, I was like, surely I'll make the varsity team. Surely
Mm.
I'll play on the freshman team my freshman year. But my second year, I really want to play on the varsity team. And um,
It's an attaboy right there.
yeah, I got to get that attaboy. That's exactly right. And what ended up happening was I didn't make the varsity team.
Mm.
And the idea of playing JV was just too much for me, and I quit. I quit
Wow.
playing this sport that I absolutely loved,
Wow. Yeah.
and it was because of I couldn't hold and it was shame. It was like I couldn't hold the shame and the disappointment, and nobody was actually saying it to me. Nobody was like, "Oh, we're so disappointed that you didn't make the team." It was just this internal, they're gonna look at me and reject me or think I'm lesser because I didn't make the varsity team. I can't handle that ridicule, so I'm just gonna quit before I even have to face it.
And if we're gonna name that, would you call that the voice of fear speaking to you, or how would you name that voice now that you're looking back on it?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. It was a combo. I mean, it's a combo voice for sure. For sure, there was fear of rejection, fear of not being good enough, but, I mean, to me, I think that's the voice of shame and what shame does. It causes us to separate, and shame is there's something, like, deeply inherently lesser about me. It's that feeling, and when that voice speaks, oof, it is a cutting voice for us, and it causes us to withdraw, and the power of that heart motivation, I mean, it caused me to in school, I made good enough grades that I wasn't gonna get in trouble, but I didn't wanna really apply myself and fail,
Mm, wow.
and so I did just enough that I could justify failing, um, but I wasn't gonna get in trouble, so I was like a B student.
Yep.
And I can remember in college, my first Bible class with this guy named Dr. Roark, who I really looked up to and really wanted his respect and really wanted his accolades.
Mm,
I made a C on the first test in his class. Made it. I even made it. Maybe it was a D. I don't know. And he pulled me aside after class and he said, "You're not living up to you didn't. I don't even think you studied for this test."
mm,
And that may have worked in high school. And he didn't say it condemningly. In fact, it called me up, and in a good way. Again, motivated by like I want to earn this guy's respect, but he affirmed me. He actually said, "You're capable of more than this."
wow. Yeah.
And I never made below an A in any of his classes ever after that. And it was again, it was in a good way calling me up to something higher, but also motivated by this internal fear of because if I don't, he's gonna reject me. He's not gonna honor me. He's not gonna and so the fruit of it was everywhere in my life. It
Yeah.
was both paralyzing to me and keeping me from doing things that I loved and found joy in, and motivating me in some ways where the world would look at it, like what I was just describing, and go, "Oh, you're making A's. That's so awesome.
Mm,
And we're so proud of you, and that's so great." And Jesus, I learned later, he actually cares about the motivation of our heart. That's what he's after.
yeah.
And I knew none of that stuff. And so fast forward to this moment where I'm walking around with Donna and I'm just describing like just some of this fear and I don't even know what's happening. It's all subconscious and so subtle within me. And Donna then invites me. She's like, "Why don't we just listen to God about that? Let's just
Mm,
sit down together and listen to God about it." And so we sit down together and she starts asking these questions and I'm like, "This is not going to work. This is not going to work." Um, "Chris, what's the dominant negative emotion that you're feeling in your life?" And I'm like, "Well, I think it's fear. I'm pretty sure it's fear. I I don't really know my own feelings though, but I think it's that." And God wins the first time or wins a memory, a moment
mm,
when Chris felt that fear. Would you take him to just a memory where he felt this kind of fear?
mm,
And he took me to the moment that I um I had to go up in front of my church right before I left for Baghdad. And they wanted to pray for me. They wanted to, write my name on the prayer list and what are three things that we can pray for you about?
mm,
Which is just so loving and kind, right? That just we want to support you and we want you to know that we're behind you and with you. And God takes me back to that moment where I'm so nervous to stand up in front of this crowd of people that I'd literally grown up with, who were literally family to me almost and had
mm,
raised me. And I'm standing in front of them in the memory and I'm terrified to talk to them.
yeah.
And Donna just asked this simple question. Um, God, would you show Chris, like, what's he actually afraid of in this moment? What's he believing?
Mm.
And again, I didn't even believe that God could speak really. And this thought pops into my head because I see not just their faces, but it was like their eyes became really big in this moment in my imagination. Um, and God, what do you want Chris to know about that? And it was like, oh my gosh, I'm terrified that they're actually going to judge me. That's what I'm afraid of here. I'm afraid that I'm going to get up in front of them. I'll say the wrong thing. I'll fumble over my words. I'll say something stupid. They'll judge me and reject me.
Mm.
Wow, that's weird. Like, why am I didn't even, I had no idea of that motivation. Like, why I was so afraid to speak in front of people, why I was so afraid to, and oddly enough, people had always told me, you're going to be a teacher one day. You're going to stand up in front of people and
Wow.
teach. And I'm going, no way.
Well,
Like,
just to pause that for a second, like the sort of the identity or the gift set that's like on you, on your soccer, teaching, all these things are essentially held captive like by
100%.
the voice of shame, the voice of fear. And
Wow.
it's insane to watch how those two things just
Yeah.
repel each other because of that
Mhm.
separated worldview you're talking about.
Exactly. It robs us
Yeah.
of the truth of our identity and what God has actually created us for. It's how the enemy works in our life.
Yeah.
Believing the lie, being motivated by fear, shame, guilt, all those things robs us of what God has for us, robs us of the abundant life that Jesus is holding out to us.
Yeah. That life to the fullest. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Mm.
so there I am, praying with Donna, and that comes up, and it was just this revelation of understanding, like, this is what's happening in your heart. God just showing me, like, this is what's actually in your heart right now, son. And, um, and it made me really emotional, right? It was like, "Oh my gosh." And then he reminded me of the soccer moment. You quit soccer your sophomore year. You
Mm.
let the enemy rob you of this thing that I gave you. Now I came back to soccer and I played and I loved it. I still played. I played in Jordan, and if I still could, I would. I'm 45 now and my body's a little older now, um like he even took me back to that memory. You know that moment that you walked away from soccer?
Mm.
Like, it was fear. It was just shame and fear that had robbed you of something that I gave you the ability to do, and it brought you so much joy. You walked away from that. He took me to a moment of, this is funny, Legos. I loved Legos growing up, and I was in 8th grade, and my younger brother had a friend over who was in 7th grade. They were both in 7th grade. And they saw me playing with my Legos, and my brother's friend just made an offhanded comment like, "Oh, I didn't know 8th graders played with Legos." And I don't even think he was being critical. But I put my Legos away and I was like, "I will never play with these again," because I didn't realize that this isn't what I should be doing as an 8th grader. And people might
Mm.
reject me, and the shame of feeling like, "Wow, I'm gonna be rejected for this." And so the masks that I started wearing, and I became this person. And this is what God was showing me that very first time I sat down with Donna, all the ways that the enemy had robbed through fear, through lies, through deception,
Mm.
had robbed me of all the things I loved in life, all the joys, all the great things that God had given to me, and how I'd learned to wear masks like the Pharisees. Like the word hypocrite in the Greek
Mm.
actually means play acting.
Wow. Mm.
Play acting. It's like you're just play acting. It doesn't mean double-minded. That's kind of how we use it. Like, oh, you say this and then you do the same thing. It means play acting. You guys are just acting. You've
Mm.
learned to wear a mask that other people will look at and accept you for. And so you pray to be seen by others. You're play acting because they honor you for your prayers in the marketplace and your prayers out in public. And you give tithes and all this stuff out in the open because you want the place of honor. And he
Mm.
just began showing me, on the negative, this is what it's robbed from you. And on this other side, here's how you've been operating in the world. And it was this,
Mm.
immediately I'm like, this has to be God speaking to me. It has to be his spirit of truth bringing revelation, because
Mm.
I've never had these thoughts before. And so then Donna asks this beautiful question: God, where did this begin in Chris? Where did
Mm.
this seed, the lie, that first lie, get planted in him? And he took me back to, and again, I've told you, I had a good dad, I had a great family, I had a really actually positive childhood.
Mm.
But there was this moment, where I said my dad worked a lot of hours and wasn't around a lot, and I watched him take my older brother out often, and it just made me jealous, like, and I wanted that time with my dad. And my dad came and picked me up from school one day because my mom couldn't take me to swim practice.
Huh.
And it was one of these moments in my life where it dawned on me like, man, I never get time with my dad. I'm just sitting in the car. It's just the two of us. I don't want to go to swim practice. I want to go get ice cream. I just want to hang out with him.
Mm.
And this is where, when Donna asked that question, God, would you take Chris back to the moment that all this began for him? This is the memory that came up. And
Mm.
literally, I'd never thought about it since it happened. It wasn't like something I dwelled on all the time, or that was like, oh, it stings. Even when it came up, I was confused. I was like, this moment, with my dad in the car. But I remember what happened. And it was like, okay, yeah, I wanted to hang out with my dad, but I didn't know how to tell him.
Yeah.
And I'm recounting this to Donna, and I'm like, here's what's happening. We're getting closer and closer to the why, and I'm getting more and more upset. I begin to cry. Dad, I don't want to go to swim practice, but I didn't know how to tell him, like, let's just go get ice cream instead.
Yeah.
So we pull up to the Y. He gets frustrated with me, and he's trying to actually do a good dad thing and say, you can do hard things. And I know that swim practice is hard, but you can do it. And
Mm.
I'm like, no, you don't get it. So more and more fear inside of me, whatever was happening inside of me, just tears. That's all that was coming out of me. And it frustrated my dad in that moment. He got out of the car, he came around, opens my door because I wouldn't get out. And he pulls me out of the car and he just sort of pushes me toward the Y. And he's like, you always do this. You start acting like such a wimp and you
Oh.
start crying.
Mm.
Just go. You got this. And then he gets back in the car and drives off.
Mm.
And I wipe my tears and walk into the Y and I go to swim practice. Didn't think anything of it. And God takes me back to that moment.
Mm.
And I'm telling this to Donna and I'm thinking like, I don't even get it. Like what's happened in this memory that this was the impetus for all of my people pleasing and fear of rejection and all of this. And then she asked the question, yeah, God, would you explain this to Chris? What do you want him to know about this memory? What did he come to believe about himself in that?
Mm. Mm.
And it wasn't even so much, there could be the temptation to believe my dad in that moment, "Oh, I'm a wimp. Oh, I'm not strong enough." And there was probably an element of that, but that wasn't really the lie. That wasn't the deep down break inside my heart. It was really, what I walked away believing was, I think I annoy people. Like here, I just wanna hang out with my dad. I just wanna be with him and spend time with him. And instead, he just repeatedly, I feel, pushed away, like he doesn't wanna spend time with me. I must annoy him. I must bother him somehow. And so what do I have to do to not be an annoyance? And do I annoy everybody? Is that a universal? Like, my older brother and sister do often tell me, "You're annoying, go away, we don't like," that sort of thing. But it was like this is the subtlety of the enemy. This is the way he began to narrate for me that memory
Yeah.
and how my heart received it as a seed planted into the soil of my heart. Yeah, you're annoying. You bother people. They don't want you around.
Mm.
What? And then it's like we make a vow. Um, okay, well then what do I have to do to not be rejected in this way? What do I have to become to not be annoying? And so sarcasm. Again, you asked earlier about fruit. I became very sarcastic and funny, and I would cut people down because that made people laugh and they accepted me and they would reject that other person, which is what I was afraid of. But I became sort of powerful in this way, at least felt
Mm.
powerful. And again, soccer, like all the different things in my life, I just began to see, like, I'm even what comes to mind is in my youth group, my brother and I and our friends, we were sort of natural leaders in the youth group, And I loved overhearing the moms in the youth group say, "Oh, we would love for our daughters to, you know," and I loved that. It just felt so, oh my gosh, I'm not being rejected. I'm doing all the right things religiously. I'm a good kid.
Mm.
My older brother get into all sorts of trouble, and I actually envied him for the freedom that he felt in that. He wasn't afraid of getting in trouble.
Wow.
And but at the same time, I watched my dad get upset with him over and over again for those things. And it was like, well, I don't want that. So I'm going to just do everything right. I'm going to be a really good kid. And again, Jesus cares about the motivations of our heart. And I didn't realize that even doing morally right things and good things was a prison. Didn't dawn on me. Didn't realize it.
Mm.
And this is where the righteousness that Jesus offers us has nothing to do with right and wrong, actually. It's that's the knowledge of the tree of good and evil, right and wrong, is actually a result of the fall. It's not what Jesus is offering us, a
Mm.
better life, a better moral life. It's something far greater than that, actually.
Mm.
And so here's what was really beautiful. And Donna asked this question, okay, Jesus, where are you in that car with Chris and his dad?
Mm.
And it never dawned on me, even up to that point. Again, I already talked about the separated worldview that I was living in. I didn't realize, like, my entire life, God had never once for a moment left me. And I had never once stopped to even look or ask him, like, where are you at right now? Just show me, like, give me a sense of your presence right now in this moment. And Donna asked that question, and I saw, uh, again, this language of seeing. Where did you see that? How did that work? It was like, well, yeah, it's the eyes of our heart. I saw it with the eyes of my heart. That's what Paul prays and asks, that God would open the eyes of our heart, that you may
Mm.
see and experience the love of God. And
Mm.
so I see in this, again, vision kind of a thing, but it was really like, yes, it was my imagination, because that's the screen onto which our heart projects images. But what was in my heart in that memory, I'm
Mm.
seeing Jesus behind me in the car, and he leans forward, he puts his hands on my shoulders, and immediately I start bawling, like really
Mm.
crying.
Yeah.
And it was like Omar, I've watched Omar have this experience, and now I'm experiencing this love
Mm.
and experiencing it, not knowing about it, not having a verse for it, but I'm experiencing the kindness and love and gentleness of God. And
Mm.
Jesus leans forward with these hands that immediately were communicating, "It's okay. You're okay. You're okay. Your dad and you're missing each other right now. That's all that's happening. Your
Yeah.
dad doesn't reject you. He doesn't hate you. He does want to spend time with you. He's got his own hangups and his own fears about work and how many hours he needs to put in and all. But that's not. Let me re-narrate this for you. Your
Mm.
dad loves you. It's okay. He
Mhm.
doesn't think you're a wimp. That's not what he thinks about you."
Mm.
And Donna asks this question, God, what do you want Chris to know about his identity? What do you call him?
Mm.
I was like, what a great question. What a crazy question, but what a great question. I've never stopped to think, like, I knew what I wanted others to think about me,
Mm.
and I tried to live up to it, right? I was always trying to conform my external behaviors and words and stuff to what I thought others wanted, but I'd never stopped to ask, like, God, what do you actually think about me? I-
Mm.
I'm actually afraid to ask that question, because what if you don't like me? What-
Wow. And I'm so concerned about what other people think of me. And if I could hear it from you, like, wow,
yeah,
that's something very different. Yeah.
yeah. And so, and I just felt such love in that moment, like deep in my heart love. It was just you. And he called me Christopher, which is my name. My mom named me that. And he reminded me of a moment with that same professor, Dr. Roark. I took Greek class with him. And there was a moment in that class that the Lord reminded me of, where we came to this one particular part of speech, and he stopped in the middle of class, and he's like, "Your name, Christopher." it was was the part of speech, and he was like, "It means to carry or to bear, and your name means the one who carries and bears Christ in his being."
Wow.
And I remember him saying that to me, and it felt like one of these naming moments. Like, it felt significant,
Yeah.
but I just sort of held it, and I didn't know that through him, God was actually saying something to me and speaking to me in that moment. But God reminded me of that moment in my Greek class, and um, and it was like, "Yeah, that your name actually means this, and it's who you are to me, and your mom named you well,
Mm,
and I want you to learn how to carry me, not just my name to the nations." Like, that's all I knew of the gospel, just go tell people about Jesus. It was, "No, I want you to become like and bear in your person the love of Jesus so that everyone you encounter," again, coming back to that story of, you don't know how to love these people. I want you to love like I love, and I will come follow me and I'll show you how to do this. I will show you how to love Muslims. I will show you how to become like me. And it wrecked me. It became like, okay, and I've dedicated the last 20 years of my life, 21 years of my life to just running after this, running after Jesus in this way. I got to have more of this.
mm. Oh, that's so beautiful. So you leave that moment and you've been marked like with a new identity. Like this is who I was going in. I'm the annoying one, and I'm leaving as the one who bears. What was it? What was it again? The one who bears, or
Yeah, the one who bears Christ, the carrier of Christ. Yeah, like in my being. Yeah, Christopher. Yeah.
wow, wow. So then it's like now you've got this brand new invitation to step out into the world, like as this Christopher, right, out into the world. And I would imagine, it starts. It's almost, is that the moment where the lens sort of switched a bit, and it was like, wow, I've experienced the love of God. I've experienced Him naming me. Um, I've experienced the Spirit moving, like moving me to these different scenes in my life to help me reorder the story
Yeah.
around this name, right? And yeah, like that seems like a paradigmatic shift where it's just like, wow, I start seeing the world very differently.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it certainly has been a journey to get there, and
Yeah,
it didn't all just
yeah,
change overnight,
yeah,
but for sure there was a significant shift in even the trajectory of my life, and I realized I was going a totally different way after that.
yeah.
But it did take time to really come into an understanding of His witness all the time, and to begin practicing that
Mm,
witness.
yeah,
And learning to hear his voice, and then realizing, like, actually what he led me into over the next 20 years was, you've lived your entire life also under the lie of scarcity and not enough, and it's all up to you, and I'm going to have to show you a totally different way. It's what he did with the Israelites, why he took them into the wilderness first.
yeah,
And so it's been this journey of discipleship to actually break apart all those false worldviews and false identities, because there have been more than one. But
yeah. Well, I want to check on time here for a second. Are you okay on time, or when do you? Okay.
yeah, I'm good with time. Are you good
Yeah,
on?
yeah. I'm doing good, but I just wanted to share that I think there's such this beautiful correlation between adventure, because you're still in Iraq, you're still in the Middle East, and there's this whole adventure to still step into. And I know from my life, like once that lens starts to shift, then it's like the adventure and the unknown and the mystery of all the things that you've now said yes to. Maybe you decided to start your own business, or you went to Iraq like you did, or you decided to finally have a kid, or whatever it is, whatever that adventure is that's now been waiting. It's like you have this connection and this ability, connection, that word instead of separation. You now have that connection to be able to process all the fear and all the things that start coming up in the midst of this adventure that he's invited you into. And it's like, I just go back to the call of Joshua, where he's like really inviting Joshua to like be strong, be courageous, for the Lord your God goes with you. Like we're going into the promised land, we're going into this
Right.
adventure, and this strength of heart, or this ability to really learn how to connect and like truth tell and talk about all the stuff that's going on in your heart. Like you now have a connected space to go connect there,
Yeah.
and then out of that, instead of fear comes this courage of like, wow, I could actually step into this to this land where there's giants and there's all these things, right? And so courage starts to well up in you instead of fear. And then it's like, well, and I'm not going by myself because the Lord's
Right.
with me, like
Right.
constantly, step by step. And so this idea, and I know, fast forward to Jamie and Donna, and they come back from 25 years overseas, and which you've spent a lot of time with them. They've written this book, Living Fearless. Yeah, it really like starts to unpack and then tease this ability of how to actually go on adventure with God, which is what he's up to, and how to do it in a way where fear doesn't dominate the story.
Yeah.
And
Yes. Yeah.
and like the true life that starts pouring out of that. I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah, and so again, all these lessons for them didn't come overnight. They had great mentors as well, and
Yeah.
um, uh, but what the Lord did about, I don't know, it's been about almost 10 years now. I think in 2017 or so, they had come back from living overseas, and they were being asked to just teach these principles that they'd learned, and
Yeah.
that I got to experience with them and continue to grow and learn from them and with them. And um, the Lord directed them to start this company, Identity Exchange, and they were being invited into different places and teaching. And Jamie's such a great storyteller, and he tells just these really fabulous stories about what it looks like to walk in the kingdom of God. And Donna's then teaching and leading all sorts of people through the same process that she took me through all those years ago. And simultaneously, I'm living overseas, and actually, I was coaching American football at the time, which was really a fun experience and a wild moment. And
Yeah.
I distinctly heard the Lord say to me, so again, identity comes I actually talk about my sonship phase, where it's really I was receiving from the Lord an internal identity, and
Mm.
it was rooted in that name Christopher that he spoke to me. The next 10 years of my life were really discovering and understanding not who I was to others or what I was supposed to do in the world. It was really him rooting and establishing me in
Mm.
just purely his love. And you could actually do nothing the rest of your life, and you would still have value to me, and you would still be worth it to me. And this has really become powerful to me because my dad actually has Alzheimer's and
Mm.
has no abilities that he used to have, and the skills that he used to possess are no longer there. And it'd be real tempting to ask the question, well, yeah, does he have any worth and value anymore? And the answer to everybody in my family, all of us, is still absolutely. Not just for what he did for us in the past, but like currently, right now, he
Mm.
still has value and worth apart from what he can do and accomplish. And that's been such a poignant lesson in this disease that's actually really, most of us are afraid of it, and I've had to work through a lot of fear and grief around it, but this has been one of the lessons that the Lord has even taught me through just walking and with my dad through this whole season of Alzheimer's.
Wow.
And it reinforces this, what I was talking about. I went through this season of, is my value and worth only in what I can do externally
Mm.
out in the world? And the answer is no. I would have died for you had you not been able to do anything for me. Your value, your worth, your security, all that stuff, your belonging, it
Mm.
is what it is in relation to me. And once the Lord, and that was a long work, actually, the Lord had to work, and Lord isn't even the right word. Father, the good Father actually had to take me through
Mm.
to help me understand that part of my identity. And then it was years later, or sort of around the same time that Jamie and Donna were launching Identity Exchange, I was having this understanding finally, this sort of revelation. The Lord was saying, okay, now that you've got that piece of it,
Mm.
now we can start giving it away. You can give away now what you've been receiving from me. I want the whole world to understand this. I want the whole world to be rooted in my love, understand they belong to me. Their value and worth has nothing to do with what they can produce. That's what the world teaches. But
Mm.
in my kingdom, as me as a good father, that's not how I measure your worth.
Wow.
And I had 3 kids at that point, and so that message was very easy for me to accept because it was, yeah, that's how I feel about my own kids. Like, they're still in my arms, they could do nothing for me. And here I am holding these kids, looking in their face, and I'm like, I adore them. Man, I would die for them. I would. And it was like, as I began to realize these are my feelings for these kids, I could just sense the Father saying to me, yeah, like that. Like that. That's what I'm like. And that's who you are to me.
Mm.
And it would wreck me. I was so undone by that. But then I came to this point as Jamie and Donna 2017, 18 are launching this new company to really mentor others and in a much broader sense. What I feel like the Lord has given them in terms of just the how to's. Again, that was significant to me. I was asking, how do I do this life with Jesus?
Yeah.
Um, and what they are, and still discovering, but a lot of what the Lord had given them, they're now doing as a business in the world, with marketplace, with business owners, with athletes, with politicians, and the doors are just continually opening because it's really the kingdom belongs in all these places, not just in the church.
Mm.
And so we're working with church leaders and missionaries, but we're also working with not those people, and just people are people.
Yeah.
And, so it's in that season that the Lord started talking to me about being an identity coach, and actually just the word was coach in those days. That was just the one word. It was like, we're gonna move into coaching.
Mm.
And, a few years later, I was with Jamie and Donna, and I'd sat with that word. I didn't know what to do with it. Okay, God wants me to be a coach. I actually don't wanna be a coach. I like playing soccer. I like being the forward on the field, and okay, coach, that means what? I'm sidelined now. I'm not good enough to be, all the ways I was interpreting that word. And then Donna starts talking about identity exchange and what they're doing and the
Mm.
doors that God is opening. And she's like, you keep coming to my mind. I think the Lord keeps bringing you to my mind for a reason. Would you want to become one of our identity coaches? And
Mm.
I mean, I didn't even have to think about it. It just hit me all. It was like, oh, this is what you meant by that. Oh,
I was just
amazing.
laughing because so many times, like, would you pray about being an identity coach? And you're like, I've already been thinking, there's no prayer needed.
Absolute no-brainer, like, yes. I don't even need to check in with my wife on that one. I'm just absolutely yes, and
Awesome.
so, yeah, it was awesome.
That's beautiful. Oh,